Please rise for the arrival of our chief guest, the President of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, His Excellency Ranil Wickremesinghe, accompanied by keynote speaker Mr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, Chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, Duminda Hulangamur, Vice Chairman Mr. Krishan Balendra, and Deputy Vice Chairman Mr. Bingumal Tevaratantri. And please remain standing for the national anthem.
Sri Lanka Mata, Appa Sri Lanka, Namo 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 Mata, Appa Sri
Thank you, everyone. You may be seated. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. If there are two words that have been used extensively in the last year in Sri Lanka, it is growth and it is reform. And it is safe to say that after a country has been through an unprecedented crisis as we have, growth and reform are great in partnership and go well together. Sustained reform accelerate growth is the overarching theme of the 23rd Sri Lanka Economic Summit, organized by the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, with its history dating back to 1839 and, safe to say, having been party as well as being privy and been centric to innumerable chapters in Sri Lanka's economic and social and political history. A galaxy of speakers and panelists will take you through Sri Lanka's prospects, the reforms that are underway, the 17th IMF program, structural changes, and the goals and benchmarks set by this country. The next 4 years will be key to keeping the country on an even keel, leveraging opportunity and maximizing growth sustainably. But it has to be a process of walking the talk and not simply rhetoric. May I now invite the chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, Tuminda Hulangamur, to deliver his address.
Honorable Ranil Wickramasinghe, President of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, Mr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, former Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission of the Government of India, Mr. Kisham Balendra, Vice Chairman, Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Bingumathia Tantri, Deputy Vice Chairman and Conference Chair, past Chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, members, ladies and gentlemen. As the Chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, it's a pleasure for me to welcome all of you to the inauguration of the 23rd Economic Summit. I'm indeed grateful to the Honorable President for taking the time to be with us today, in spite of his very tight schedule. I know he's due to go overseas tomorrow. Thank you very much, sir, for taking the time to be with us today. And Dr. Harshakab, Mr. Thank you very much. Sorry I didn't see you on the left-hand side. Welcome. And Mr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, when we were discussing about the economic summit and the keynote speaker, I had just finished reading your book backstage, and I told the conference chair that, since Sri Lanka is going through reform at the moment, there's no other person than Mr. Montek Ahluwalia who can deliver the keynote address. So thank you very much for coming all the way from India and being with us. Ladies and gentlemen, last year, when my previous chairman, Mr. Vishgovinda was here, addressed the economic summit, we were just coming out of the the crisis we were facing. Long queues for petrol, long queues for gas, 13-hour power cuts, civil disturbances, processions, and strikes. That was how the 22nd Economic Summit was presented. But from that day to today, we've come a long way. We are able to stabilize the economy relatively. We were able to grow our foreign reserves from $20 billion to at least $3.5 billion. Our exchange rate was liberalized, and we have what we can say currently is a stable exchange rate. The inflation has been brought down from about 70%, near 70%, to less than 10% single digit. The interest rates have been brought down from about 30% to 15%. So looking at all the statistics, Sri Lanka has been able to stabilize the economy to a great extent. And we're really grateful to the Honorable President for giving leadership to that process. The Ceylon Chamber always stood by the reform process and will stand by the reform process as it goes along. However, ladies and gentlemen, reform and sustain in the reform is not only adequate. Sri Lanka also needs to find a growth path. It's a very difficult situation with debt sustainability not being able to be achieved at the moment. We feel that is the biggest elephant in the room. Once we get the debt restructuring done, hopefully by the beginning of next year or so, Sri Lanka will be back again open to international community. Our rating should go up with that. We should get bilateral funding, and all projects should be able to start. Secretary is here with me. Thank you very much, Secretary, also for your tireless efforts over the last year. And Dr. Kumaraswamy, who helped the Chamber and the government at that time in the discussion. So, but we have to find a growth path from where we are, and that is why we have termed the summit Sustaining Reform and Accelerating Growth. We need to get the macro fundamentals correct first, which has been done now, and we hope that a 1.7 to 3% growth will not be adequate to the private sector. That is here, we are looking at a 5-6% growth, and I'm sure the President will spell out what growth plans are for the country. However, having said that, we also need to have consensus amongst political parties, civil society, trade unions, chambers, in driving a common economic agenda for this country. Not a situation where political parties differ significantly from each other. On national issues, on economic issues, we expect political parties to have some element of consensus in the interest of the people at large. So the Ceylon Chamber has engaged several political parties. We have engaged trade unions, we have engaged civil society in trying and driving this message across. So ladies and gentlemen, for this tomorrow's event that we are starting, Sustaining Reform and Accelerating Growth, we have invited a multitude of speakers from different walks and disciplines who can talk to you on international experiences and locally what has to be done. We are talking about SOE reforms. We have a session on public sector reforms. And then we have a final session on how to reach political consensus on economic side, and Dr. Harshidi Silva, I'm sure, will be a part of that meeting. So with all that, we have structured this whole session to talk to the Sri Lankan private sector who are members on how do we accelerate growth for Sri Lanka after coming out of our reform program. So with those few words, I want to thank the organizing committee headed by Bingu and Aliki for putting all this effort in organizing a successful event. It's a sellout. I was told over 500 participants have registered, physical, and there are so many joining virtually, about over 100 people. And I want to thank all the sponsors who have helped us in this process, and all you people who are here today. And I wish the event a success and wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the Chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Langamua, for giving us a perspective of what it was like 1 year ago, how far we have come, and what needs to be done as we move forward. I would now like to invite to our midst to make his address our chief guest this evening, the President of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, His Excellency Ranil Wickremesinghe.
Dr. Monte Aluwalia, President of the Chamber, distinguished guests and friends. I looked at your theme for 2023, Economic Summit. I don't know whether what we've done can be called reform. If you look at the meaning of reform, which I had done, which I did a few weeks back, this is not reform. It's a restructuring and a radical restructuring. And there's no going back. Now we've got to realize this. What is taking place now is something that can't be turned back. We've got to work within this new policy frame. We have made significant progress in the efforts to restructure its debt in order to restore debt sustainability. The government, along with its financial and legal advisors, have been engaged in good faith negotiations with all its creditors over the last several months. All creditor groups have been very cooperative and constructive in their engagement with us. With regard to the official creditors, Sri Lanka engaged in negotiations with the Official Creditor Committee and in parallel with China Exim Bank. Contrary to many expectations, Sri Lanka has been able to successfully navigate this process due to its transparency and good faith engagement. China Exim Bank was the first to provide Sri Lanka with agreement in principle on specific financial terms to restructure the country's debt. We expect the Official Creditors Committee to provide a similar agreement in principle very shortly. With this, we expect that the IMF board will be in a position to conclude the first review of Sri Lanka's EFF program within the month of December. Discussions with external private creditors are ongoing in parallel, and we expect to reach agreement on specific restructuring terms with them very shortly. We are mainly relying on a long-term extension of the debt. But what does this mean? The economic principles on which we will operate for the future is what has gone into these net negotiations. If we go away from it, then the creditors are entitled to act. So we are now fixed. We have to work within this frame, within this agreement. I thought to myself, what should I do? Is this correct or not? That we have this framework which we agreed. I had no problem with the framework. I could agree with many of those things. And I had the view we should have done it earlier. And I thought to myself, look, if I don't do this, no one is going to do it. And next time, if I don't have this system, if we don't agree, we don't have a long-term agreement, the next government, someone will want to turn it back and give the goodies. We can't be auctioning non-existing resources all the time. That's what Lee Kuan Yew said of us. So we are all within this framework. It's a radical restructuring. So that's the first point I want to make to you all. We have to all realize what it is, a very, very competitive economy, and I think we have to do it. We all agree. These are decisions I had to take in private. You want to know, you want me to have a consensus. How can I have consensus with people who ran away and didn't take responsibility? Neither political parties nor trade unions. You think they would have allowed me to do one of these steps? So there is no question of me having a consensus with them or the IMF. Forget about me. You tell them we have to agree with it. For how long are we going to be a bigger nation? That's my view as a Sri Lankan. Are we going to be beggars? Going and asking other people to help us out each time because we didn't do our maths correctly? Because we are not willing to export? Because we are not willing to be competitive? So we are asking other people, other countries to give their taxpayers money because we had it wrong. You can't go on like this. For us, this is the last chance. Either we've got to take it or bust it. So we are, with this framework, we are entering into a new political era also. Everyone has to make their policies within it. If they are going to break it, they must tell the country. I don't think any of us wants to go back to the queues, to what we went through. So the country has to agree on it. If the country is agreed, the others will go along. So you all have to decide whether you want to agree on it or not. If you do, tell the others. So this is for economic stabilization. That alone is not enough. After we stabilize the economy, what are we going to do? Are we going to again have a balance of payment deficit, and unable to balance our budget, then we will have this again within 10 years. I can give it to you in writing. If you go on like this, you will have another crisis within 10 years, maybe earlier. So we have to change. As I say, we have to be a competitive economy, export-oriented economy. What we've said is a digitalized economy and a green economy. You have to look anew. When we came in 77, we thought we wanted a new economy. We started the free trade zone. No one thought. Who thought that we were going to do apparels? So this is what we are planning now. So I just you very, very briefly. You will all have to be very competitive, either to compete with imports or to export. We are having free trade agreements, which means in the next 5 to 15 years, the tariffs will have to be adjusted, and that will have to be downwards. That's where competition is going to come in. So what we want to do? Of course, we looked at the competitive aspects and went in for the low-hanging fruits. Only one available is tourism. We'll have about a 1.5 million this year, which is still 1 million short of our peak. We must get 2.5 million. But that alone is not sufficient. In the next stage, it will be 5 million, and we should at least earn $500 a head. Now, I was in this room yesterday when I said, I think we must say goodbye to minimum rates. Some were happy, others were unhappy. But which country has minimum rates? I mean, basically, if you do your job correctly, you should get it. We can't go on crutches anymore. But yes, we will go on to 5 million. We are going to market Sri Lanka in a way that you can't think possible. We will have a full tourist center, which you all will have to take over and run. The whole of Republic Square, President's House, the Navy headquarters, all the way down to the lighthouse, on this way, all the way up to Bere, and down into the museums and the Independence Square. Now don't complain when the President's House is shifted to Madivella. We have to do that to open this up. Maybe I'm doing all this to get it there. Nevertheless, in Kandy we are already starting. Large ones, 1,000 acres, 2,000 acres to open out. Completely new. We are at least looking at 6 new golf courses. Nuvareli, I am prepared to give 300 acres for a big golf course. Look, one in Victoria, 2 in Nuvareli. There will be others to come. So we will have to rethink our tourist policies, how to get them, where we are going to. And remember, you have 2 big markets. One is next door, India. Other is China. So let's work on those and learn how to market there. So this is one. Secondly, modernizing agriculture for agriculture exports. We've already started to look at paddy cultivation to go up to 8 metric tons from the 3.5 we have now per hectare. We already hit 11 somewhere near Hambantota in the Udawale area. The dry zone agriculture, which means we can be self-sufficient within the dry zone. We will pass legislation to enable you to cultivate whatever you want in the wet zone, any crop in the wet zone paddy fields. Just imagine the export agriculture you can have around Katunayaka. You can use those paddy fields there and in Kurunagal, in Kandy. We are also looking at the whole supply chain. How are we going to improve it? And back to about 300,000 acres to be given for commercial agriculture, of which about 100,000 will be in the state plantations, which will be offered plantation by plantation. Mainly on that, I will restrict it to local entrepreneurs. System A and B in Mahavali would come to another 75 to 100,000 acres. Part will have to go to the farmers there, but a large number for commercial farming. System A was meant completely for commercial farming. Another 100,000 we can find. So that's 300,000. And if you improve our plantations, we are even the plantations, just imagine, going for agriculture, which from the time of the Anuradhapura kings, we have been doing agriculture. It doesn't mean that we should stick only to agriculture. So let's get back to it. If you can get the smallholders in without the 300,000, other than the 300,000, we have about another 400,000 in the regional plantation companies. Then we have all the smallholders, some of whom be competitive. We've already started on milk food, on dairy. Now with Amul also coming in, umbrella farms are expanding, Fontara, SLES. We should have milk. I'd like to have excess milk production, competitive one. Let's value add our milk. This is what's available. You have 1 acre, go in for high technology agriculture. That's enough. So you all can be involved in agriculture, modernizing agriculture is going to be the next. We have to think of new areas. So one is renewable energy. We have, we will certainly have our own targets for Sri Lanka, but we have excess renewable energy. Look at wind power. We have sufficient wind power, and we have connectivity with India. But we can create more. I think it's nearly 100 gigawatts of power, especially green hydrogen available in Sri Lanka. Can sell to India, and the day there's a Singapore-India power line, join that. With green hydrogen, your ports will be 2 ports, Trincomalee and Colombo. And there's wind power also in Hambantota, so all 3 ports. You can turn this country around. We have to turn this country around. We are looking at Industry 4 technology, and we'll be fostering things such as the new technologies and AI. For the first time, I put ₹1 billion out for AI promotion for the technology, and about another 4-5 billion we are having for the other sciences. We opened out the university sector. Anyone can set up a university. Foreign university can have a campuses here. Government is India is working on with us for the development of a campus at the Chennai IIT. Government will open up 3 more technological universities, addition to the University of Agriculture Technology. So these are all. Now, will the private sector join us in having universities? That's a new area. The whole of digitalization, the whole sectors, and not only Colombo, with India we are working on Trincomalee. We are trying on Bingiria to bring new one. Jaffna, we are opening up. Jaffna will be one of the richest provinces in the next 10 years. Open up the whole of Eastern Province for tourism. Inguragoda Airport will be ready for regional flights by end of next year. We have to think big. We have to find bigger markets. That's why I'm having these free trade agreements with the Southeast Asian countries, and we have applied to enter RCEP. RCEP didn't expect anyone to apply, so they have no rules. They told us first they'll have to make up the rules. We are working with Bangladesh, with India. to upgrade the FTA into the comprehensive economic partnership. We are looking at land connectivity also with India. I always say the land connectivity with India means Tamil Nadu will have the best ports in India. They can easily, and southern part of Tamil Nadu is not even developed. You can easily industrialize Tamil Nadu, as Dr. Aluvelia will say, and with the two best ports, that development is enough for us to take off. You just think, I mean, this is what I have, what the government has in mind, but you will have other ideas. So we have to think anew, go into a new market. And thinking anew also means that I have now started the largest privatization in Sri Lanka, two largest privatization. 50,000 flats we are giving the tenants ownership. 2 million acres of government land given to farmers without ownership on LDO permits, we convert into ownership. That's going to be much larger than selling Sri Lankan Airways or SLT. We turn them into good entrepreneurs, have chances. So let's think anew. We want to develop education. There is no turning back, as I said. Look at how we can go forward. The crisis became opportunity. We must ride on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. A competitive nation, a digitized nation, and a sustainable nation, a goal to look forward to. Our keynote speaker is an Indian economist who was the Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission of the Republic of India from 2004 to 2014, the first director of the Independent Evaluation Office at the International Monetary Fund. Prior to that, he has been a key figure in the Indian economic reforms process on a continuous basis from the mid-1980s. He served as Special Secretary to Prime Ministers Rajiv Gandhi and VP Singh, as Secretary Commerce, Secretary Economic Affairs and Finance Secretary in the Ministry of Finance, and as member of the Planning Commission and member of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister. This was between 1998 and 2001. Prior to 1980, he was a member of the staff of the World Bank and the chief of the Income Distribution Division before leaving the bank to join the Government of India in 1979. He is currently a distinguished fellow of the Center for Social and Economic Policy in New Delhi and a member of the Council for Energy, Environment and Water, also in New Delhi. In 2011, he was conferred the Padma Vibhushan, India's second highest civilian award by the President of India. Please welcome our keynote speaker for the evening, Montek Singh Ahluwalia.
Your Excellency, President Vikramasinghe, Chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Duminda Hulanganamuva, ladies and gentlemen. First, let me say how deeply honored I am to be invited here to discuss, to speak to this very distinguished audience, especially as the second speaker after the Honorable President. You know, I've been asked to talk about lessons that may be relevant from the 1991 reforms in India. But having heard the President just now, I really don't think you need any listing of lessons. You outline a very, very impressive and comprehensive agenda, and I think all you have to do is get on with implementing it. What the President outlined is truly path-breaking. He's right in saying this is not reform, this is radical restructuring. And I wouldn't say that I can add any special lessons, but since I've been asked to deal with those lessons, I will make a few comments in that connection. But first, there must be a standard caution. I mean, no two countries are alike. So it's good to look at what one can learn from another country, but I don't think that should constrain you in what you do or what the potential is. So the first important thing is that there are some differences. I think the Indian crisis in 1991 was a much more classic macroeconomic imbalance crisis. So in that sense, the crisis itself was relatively easy to handle. In Sri Lanka, what has happened over the last several years has created a much deeper sense of concern about the efficiency and effectiveness of government, the appropriateness of institutions, all of which calls for deeper reform. So that's one difference. I think the other thing I would like to say is that, the world in 1991 was quite different from what it is today. I mean, India had run into a problem, India ran into a crisis, and it was very much our perception that if we can fix our problems, then, basically we just get back into a faster pace of growth because the global economy was not in difficulty. I think here, you're tackling very ambitiously a very major challenge, but you're doing it in more difficult times, in times when the global situation is highly uncertain. So with that, I'd like to pick on something that the Honorable President mentioned, which is, a crisis is an opportunity. I think the Chinese have the same ideogram or visual figure for crisis as opportunity. And that's why people often say, never waste a crisis. And I think if you do what is being outlined, you will certainly end up with people saying you didn't waste the crisis. But it is very important because people can see, as was described very recently, what it was like 2 years ago. Long queues, nothing working, etc. So that creates a willingness to do something different. And I think one can use that willingness simply to get back to normal, or use that willingness, gives you a window of time to think afresh and build a bigger consensus for more dramatic change, which is, I think, what the Honorable President was saying. And to my mind, that is certainly the way to go. I would say that in India, we did that because the macroeconomic instability was taken care of in a very short time. But we used the opportunity to do a lot of structural changes in industrial policy, trade policy, exchange rate management, banking system reform, financial sector reform, opening up the capital market, etc., etc. And these made the difference, but they made the difference over a period of time. I think this is an important aspect also of structural reform, that as one proceeds boldly in the direction of structural reform, I think we also have to recognize that the response to policies is not very easily to predict in terms of time frames. Now, certain things respond quite quickly. For example, I think one of the strongest steps taken in the last year or so has been to free the exchange rate. Had you continued with a fixed exchange rate, and sometimes this can become a completely false sense of strength. I know we often experience that in India, when people tended to view the strength of the rupee as a measure of the strength of the economy. And we used to explain this to politicians at home, that when you have a strong currency, because the economy is strong, then that is an indication of strength. But if you push a strong currency on an economy that for whatever reason is weak, you're actually weakening the economy. So to that extent, the depreciation, which must have created some problems, has also made made a very essential correction which will help in the structural changes as we go ahead. Now, I think a good indication of the range of policies that are being considered can be drawn from the fact that the government has quite boldly invited the IMF to do a diagnostic on governance. Frankly, this is an issue that's relevant for all of us. Sri Lanka is the first country in Asia to have actually asked the IMF to do such a diagnostic. And I hope that other countries in Asia, certainly we in India, will look at it, because a lot of what it says is relevant not just for Sri Lanka, it's also relevant for other countries. And in due course, particularly if it is done in Sri Lanka, it will be easier to do the same things elsewhere. One or two of the things that are mentioned there were being looked at different times in India, but we didn't quite get down to do them in a very precise manner. It's very important in institutional change that the details are got right. I mean, it's easy to set up a commission against corruption or some institution that looks after something, but if you don't set it up in the right way, with the right sort of, if you like, people appointed to it, the terms of their appointments, etc., it can be infructuous. On the other hand, if it's done right, it can gradually put in a very important set of corrective signals for the economy. I don't know how much of this will ultimately get reflected in the program that is negotiated with the IMF. But you know, I looked at the report. It did seem to me that even if many of these, maybe not all, but many of these suggestions actually are put in place, Sri Lanka would draw a lot of attention on the seriousness with which it intends to do things. And this is really relevant also in another context, which is very important in an open economy, and that is the issue of confidence. You know, flows of private investment, revival of internal private investment, all these things depend on confidence. And confidence is a very difficult thing to get. I remember at the time of the Asian crisis, there used to be this statement frequently made that, you know, confidence grows at the rate a coconut tree grows, and it falls at the rate a coconut falls. So this is something that governments have to be very aware of in an open economy. Mind you, if you're not an open economy, if there's no foreign capital coming in or whatever, don't have much external debt, all your borrowing is in domestic currency, you can cheerfully ignore these things. Bad policy will still have an effect. It will lead to crowding out, it will lead to inflation. But those things generally build up over time. In an open economy, a loss of confidence can really trigger a crisis very quickly. And this is one of the things that we found in India. We weren't that open an economy. But in 1990, there was domestic political instability because the government presided over by Mr. Rajiv Gandhi had lost the election. A mixed kind of bag government, which was not ideologically very coherent, under Prime Minister V.P. Singh had taken over. He had taken some steps regarding reservations in educational institutions and jobs, which led to a lot of disruption. Many of the parties which supported him kind of decided to break apart. And roughly at the same time, Saddam Hussein decided to invade Kuwait. And that, of course, sent the oil price shooting up. So you had a rise in oil prices and great uncertainty on the part of people whether India would be able to manage, and we experienced a loss of confidence with the capital outflow. Even though the economy was not very open, merely not renewing loans that were due and a lot of foreign exchange currency deposit holders withdrawing their money provoked a crisis. So I think in an open economy, what a lot of people feel about the quality of economic policy becomes very important. And I think some of these changes in governance, the whole issue of the independence of the central bank, the whole issue of the quality of the revenue system, the whole issue of fiscal transparency, the whole issue of whether public-private partnerships are being done in a transparent way, all of these things add to confidence, and many of them are really covered by this diagnostic report. So I hope that that is implemented, and if it is, I'm sure it will make a very big difference. One other point that I want to make, and I don't want to go on for too long, is that it's a big problem, and we saw that in 1991 in India, that when you make changes in policy, you have to tell lots of people that are doing things differently. And the big challenge for politicians is how do they get political support for people to make these changes. My experience, and I used to tell our political leaders this, that democracy is not, it's not a consensual form of government. It's actually a confrontational form of government, where the government of the day will make its proposals and the opposition will oppose. But the thing to do is to have a sufficiently broad debate in the country and an appreciation on the part of enough people that what is being done really, although it looks problematic, is going to be good for the country and will have some positive effects. I think if that is done, then I think politicians will want to criticize governments publicly. That's their job. But deep down, they'll also know that, look, this may be the right thing to do. And I think they should also keep in mind that should they ever come into power, they should not be taking positions that will make them change these policies. In fact, what a foreign investor likes best is that the fundamental policies that are good are actually insulated from political changes, though political changes, of course, are always bound to happen. I remember on one occasion, my former boss, Dr. Manmohan Singh, found that, he was being criticized by the opposition at that time, the BJP, on certain aspects where he knew that the BJP leaders were actually quite aware that this is the right thing to do. And he had a chat with the then leader of the opposition, Mr. Vajpayee, who later became Prime Minister. And he told me that Mr. Vajpayee said to him, in politics, you need to develop a thick skin. So don't get too upset by criticism. That's our job. Do the best you can and make sure that people perceive that there's something in it for them. So I think, to some extent, broadening the debate to involve other stakeholders, certainly the Chamber of Commerce, and the Chamber of Commerce itself, as the chairman said, is doing a good job in bringing everybody together. I think a lot of this is necessary. And certainly the lesson from India is that, one lesson I take is that we are a very contentious democratic system, but these things did get discussed quite extensively. And one example of how political opposition does not necessarily lead to the end of a policy is that when the last government came to the end of its term and the Modi government was coming in, there were two things that they were pushing for very hard. One was the digital identity, that's Aadhaar, which was being opposed by the BJP. The other was the goods and services tax, which is RVAT, was also being opposed by the BJP. But when the government came in, Mr. Modi actually strengthened and carried Aadhaar forward and also brought in the GST. So, I mean, one should allow a system where political opposition will take place, but somehow the essential reforms will continue. I see that my time is up, and I don't want to take more time than is allotted to me, but I would one thing is important, and that is that we should recognize that whatever is done, there should be something for the poor and the excluded, because many of these reforms have long-term effects, and many of the richer business classes, etc., are aware that this will have long-term benefit. But for the poor, they need something much more immediate. I thought in that sense, what the President announced about land being handed over in large quantities to those who currently don't have ownership seemed to me to send a very good signal from that point of view. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you very much to Mr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia for sharing your insights, your experiences, some advice, as well as giving us some gems of wisdom, and also reminding us that there is a segment that should not be left out of this whole process of reform, and that is the disadvantaged and the vulnerable segments of society. So thank you very much to our speakers. Now that we have heard from our three speakers, two speakers, our chief guest as well as our keynote speaker, we will be transitioning into a dialogue, engaging them. May I invite the President of Sri Lanka, His Excellency Ranil Wickremesinghe, and our keynote speaker, Mr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, to come up on stage, and this session will be moderated by the Chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Duminda Hulangamua. So while they come up, we'd just like to say that the Ceylon Chamber is pleased to present this unique opportunity that brings together the highest echelons of leadership, blending the vision of the nation and the expertise of the business community, as well as the insights of our distinguished keynote speaker. Over to you, Mr. Langam.
Thank you, Savitri. And some of the questions that I had for the Honorable President and Mr. Montek Ahluwalia have been answered by the respective speakers. So I had to invent something for the audience. So may I first pose a question to you? As a part of the restructuring, the word used as a reform, has been to restructure or reform the revenue to increase the GDP the revenue as a percentage of GDP from 8% to 13%, and we have seen taxes going up from 18 to 36%, VAT going up to 18%. What is the plan the government has to strengthen the revenue administration, especially the Inland Department, Excise and Customs, to broaden the tax base and to build the institutional capacity of these departments?
Well, we started off with getting RAMIS and ASCUDA into place to function. We still have some work to do, but we will be bringing in a revenue authority. And most probably the law will come in the next few months, and the reforms will begin. The issue is that there is nothing that can be done overnight. It will take you 2 to 3 years to make some significant change. We must also look at, our problem compared to India is that we had a district revenue officers under the British times, as well as up to about early 1970s. Then they were in charge of revenue collection. Then we had the assistant government agent who also carried out some revenue collections. And you went to the district secretary and everything was development. It was on how to spend the money without looking at how to earn the money. So we'll have to go back to some regional system too, like equivalent of a collector or a DRO. Yeah, so it's a big job, but I am confident that we can get over it in the coming 2-3 years.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ahluwalia, if I may ask a question from you, with regard to the Indian reform process which you initiated in 1991, and when you see what Sri Lanka is in today, part of you explained in your speech, but what differences do you see? Of course, it's a big country, the issues are different, but what differences do you see that you foresee that Sri Lanka would face as opposed to what India did? For example, most of your reform was with regard to the domestic market in India. You had licensing regimes, regulations, import restrictions, protectionism given. So you managed to change most of this and then bring in FDIs to India. It's a big market. So as opposed to Sri Lanka, where we are today, how do you see the difference between the two?
Well, in some ways, Sri Lanka had fixed its very high protection and import controls, etc., long earlier. So we were dealing with a system that was really absurdly out of date. And I think people realized that that needed to change. But you know, coming to tax matters, I mean, that's the most difficult in a way, because every institutional change needs a lot of thinking. And what we did in 1991, Dr. Manmohan Singh appointed a committee under Dr. Raja Chellaya and asked him to prepare a comprehensive report on what we should do as far as direct and indirect tax rates. That report was prepared and was easy to implement. But what we didn't do was, you know, what are the institutional changes needed in the way the revenue service is constituted? And there have been efforts made since then to do a reform there, but we've not been very successful. It's very difficult to reform systems because the system becomes a strong vested interest against the reform. I mean, for example, in India, we have a board for direct taxes and we have a board for indirect taxes. There's a very simple question that why shouldn't the two be unified? I mean, after all, the same organization is paying both direct taxes and indirect taxes. With digitalization, we're now able to cross-refer all these things, but we still have two separate boards. So, I mean, there's lots that needs to be done. And I think we need to be more aware of what's happening in the rest of the world. One of our chief economic advisors happened to also have served as a principal chief economist of the Her Majesty's tax department. And he told us that, look, the modernization of the way taxes are both designed, consultations held, structures, etc., in the United Kingdom have gone way ahead of where we are. And I think we need to follow that. I'm sure Sri Lanka would be in the same kind of position, but we need more knowledge of what's happening elsewhere.
No, we will depend on a lot of technical help, so we want to modernize it completely.
So if I may turn to you for my next question, I think Mr. Ahluwalia mentioned about the IMF diagnostic report and the outcome of that. The IMF diagnostic report that came out. And in order to improve the governance structure, and that is one of the key observations of the IMF, what efforts the government will take to improve the governance structure of the public sector?
Firstly, the report is in English, and now we are translating into Sinhala and Tamil. It's, as the ST said, it's full of technical terms, and that's taking time. But I think you should have it ready by about next January, before that. So then we'll put it into place, and there'll be a parliamentary oversight committee to follow it. Right. It'll be very, very transparent. There'll be a new oversight committee, and in addition, you put it in, I'm sure chambers and all will also start commenting. We have no issue at all.
Yes. Maybe it is translated.
Yeah, it's been translated. They want to be exact on the words, and I don't blame them for that. You can't make a change there.
So will it bring changes to the FR and FR regulation? Will it be changes to the government, FR?
Yeah, once you are there, you have to change the regulations also.
Yes.
No, I mean, basically we are taking structures made under the British time, then sort of reformed after independence once or twice. And we are trying to put into place, as Dr. Ahluwalia said, we have to now sit down, and in our case, we get technical assistance to redo the whole revenue system. It can't go on like this. So that's what we have to really modernize the whole country. And that's going to take a bit of time. You all are doing it there, but what is done in the private sector, half of it's not been done in the government sector. As you said, UK is a good example of how they changed. It's a good example.
Thank you. Mr. Ahluwalia, there is now, this time around with the IMF program being implemented, there is seemingly acceptance by the people than what it was before, because we faced a crisis and people thought that is the reform with the support of the IMF is a way forward. You were working in the IMF before as an employee of the IMF. So from that point of view, how does a country balance the needs of the IMF as supposed to the needs of the populace. Because the people always, I mean, an IMF comes when there's difficulty, and we have currently taxes going up, which is necessary, it has to be done. But how do you balance the two with regard to the needs of the IMF and the public perception of the IMF? As a person who has worked inside the IMF, how does it work?
You know, our experience with the IMF actually has been quite good. I am told by many people that the IMF tends to devote more resources to larger countries, and therefore, if you are, many of the countries in Africa, for example, have complained that they don't get enough attention and their special problems are not adequately reflected. But you know, I think over the last 10 or 15 years, the IMF has internalized the fact that a cookie-cutter approach is not right, that you have to tailor whatever you're doing to the problems of the country. That's point number one. Point number two, and I think they learned this from Indonesia in 1997, that when you go into a country, from the IMF's point of view, it's not your job to set everything right. Because in no country, even in industrialized countries, everything is not right. There are hundreds of things that are wrong, and that's what their governments are constantly trying to improve. But the job of the IMF is to identify the big constraints, the big things that need to be set right if you're really going to develop a kind of environment in which capital will flow, domestic investment will flow, foreign investment will flow. And I think they have, by and large, acquired a reasonable amount of skill in doing that. That's why, for example, this diagnostic report that I read, it's in the public domain. I mean, it's very interesting because, first of all, it spells out that many of these things have to be done over a long period of time. So they're not saying that this should be done now. The debate really be, which of these things is most important to do in the short run in order to have the maximum positive impact on investors about, let us say, the intentions of the government. That's something that they will no doubt negotiate with the Sri Lankan government. But you know, they're talking about a time frame of certain things that need to be done by 2028. So that is not going to be part of any short-term or even medium-term IMF program. But it does put things on the agenda. It does trigger a debate. And I mean, since Sri Lanka is trailblazing, being the only Asian country to have invited the IMF to do it, I think it will be very interesting for individual countries. Each country should ask its own people, like, how much of this applies to us? Because I think you will find a lot of it would apply to a lot of countries. It's not something that's only wrong in Sri Lanka. It's more like setting an ideal. And the question is, how many countries can move forward? And you know, if enough countries move forward, it becomes easier to do. I mean, after all, the G20 sort of pronounce on we must improve governance. So what does improving governance mean? We must subscribe to some kind of multilateral world order. The way a multilateral world order will come up in these areas is through practice. And if more and more countries adopt these practices, by and large, the ones that are rewarded, I mean, those practices will get replicated. So in that respect, as a professional economist, I was very pleased to see this report as the first report on Asia. But I would emphasize that it's not that the report, we shouldn't look at the report as indicating what's wrong in Sri Lanka. We should look at the report as raising the question, how much of this applies to other countries also? And I think if you do that, you'll find it applies to a large number.
Thank you, Mr. Ahluwalia. So just taking the discussion a little bit from IMF and reform, or restructuring as you mentioned it, you have embarked on discussions on FTAs with Thailand and China, and the Indian one to be expanded. Do you think you can brief the audience about the progress we have made thus far in the negotiating process and where we are on those? Because that is one way where Sri Lanka can increase the exports to other countries.
We have concluded only one, that's with Singapore. As we will conclude one with Thailand, maybe about February or January. We are close to we are close to finalizing it. We want to open up and have discussions. We've indicated to Malaysia that we'd like to have FTA with them. Similarly, we applied to join the RCEP. Now, RCEP has informed us that they first must have a procedure. They have not have a procedure to admit new members. So it's going to take a bit of time. In the meantime, we started recommence the talks with India. But now India has told us, let there be a separate, early it was to be one agreement, but they want one separate one on investment and one separate one on trade. So investments one, I think, will take off quickly. I've spoken with the Minister of Finance. We are going ahead with the trade negotiations. Once India is over, we'll talk with Bangladesh. Then at the same time, with the RCEP, while we are doing the RCEP, China had been talking to us earlier. So we just started talking with China on the agreements. So all of this means about 5-6 years within which we have to open up. But with China, we are taking a stand that we need much longer period. Outside that, well, we'll have to go back to EU on the GSP plus and to go forward beyond that. At one time, Pakistan talked to us about FTA, but I don't think they are in a position at the moment to do anything, so that will have to wait. But then it would mean that we will have in the South Asia, India, Bangladesh and Pakistan. There are no issue with Maldives. Then we'll be reaching out to all the RCEP countries, which also means Korea, Japan, Australia and New Zealand. No, that's a fairly big market. And at some stage, I'd like to look later at East Africa and South Africa. But some of our people have also gone into Nigeria. So as you go along, just keep expanding, that's all.
So my last two questions, Mr. Oliver, the President has to leave by 7:15. So are we on the correct path? Is Sri Lanka on the correct path for recovery? Based on your assessment of the country and what you've read and seen, you think we are on the, it's an unfair question to ask, but what is your view? Are we on the correct path? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've just read the IMF supervision report, which I think is quite complimentary. And it says while a few things are yet to be finished, the overall assessment seems to be positive. And I believe it's very soon in December that this thing will go to the board. In any structural reform program, you can't judge whether the whole program is on track, because many of these things have to be done a little later. You can only judge whether, as of now, the country is more or less on track. Not knowing the details, but reading the report, I get the impression that they are positioning themselves to release the first tranche of the money after the board approval in December. So I think most investors will view the Sri Lankan economy as having lived up to what it promised, and the government will be given credit for that, which it deserves. And then, of course, we have to see how things proceed in subsequent years. One of the differences between India again and, you have an election coming in a year from now. So in some sense, you could view the IMF program as a bridging loan between now and the elections, and the credibility of the longer-term strategy will become much clearer after the elections. And most people would therefore judge, in terms of short-term management, are things improving or not? And I think that clearly they are improving, and the directions that are being indicated are the right directions. More than that, I think I can't say, but I think what has happened is quite remarkable when you consider what the situation was like a year ago, or a little over a year ago when the government took over.
Thank you. So from that answer, my next question to conclude the session is, I think you mentioned that in your speech, but is there a risk of the reform or restructuring process getting reversed because of elections and political parties turning different lines. So I'm asking a difficult question from any, you can answer for yourself, but do you think that there's a risk of it getting reversed? Because we have seen previously also when elections are announced, elections are conducted, these directions change. So I know you mentioned that. I thought I'll leave that remark to you to answer that question in the usual
You should
way.
ask Dr. Harsha. No, we have this on ground. This is the agreement. Do you agree or not? That's all. If you don't agree, you tell the country. So most will fall in line with the agreement, I think. There will be a few who will. The country will have to decide. And as I know, what I think, in my assessment, country is going along with the IMF. Whatever the difficulties are, people know we are getting out of it. And situation is slightly better than earlier. No one is saying it's that good. But they know that there's hope at the end of the tunnel. And maybe we'll get there in electric car and not a fuel-driven one. But I don't think, I think it's very good at the next elections for them to come and say, we'll bring all this down. Good. But remember one thing, though former President Gotabaya is getting blamed for reducing taxes, all you guys agreed to it.
I never expected that from you. I didn't expect that answer anyway. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our session. I want to thank the Honorable President for taking the time to deliver his speech and also taking part in the discussion and also having a dig at the chamber. So thank you very much, sir, for your participation. And Mr. Aluwale, thank you very much once again for your participation, both as a keynote address and taking part in discussions. Thank you very much, both.